1-1. What is the most commonly used method for calculating gross domestic product GDP? A. The income approach only. B. The expenditure approach, income approach, and production approach. C. The balance of payments approach. D. The consumer price index method. 2. Which of the following transactions would be included in the current year's GDP calculation? A. A family purchases a newly built home. B. A college student buys a used textbook from another student. C. An investor purchases 100 shares of Apple stock. D. A retiree receives a Social Security payment. 3. What does the C represent in the GDP expenditure formula? A. Corporate investments. B. Consumer spending on goods and services. Capital expenditures. D. Currency in circulation. 4. Which of the following transactions would not be included in GDP calculations? A. A new car purchased by a consumer. B. Government spending on infrastructure. C. The sale of a used car between private parties. D. Business investment in new equipment. 5. What is the difference between nominal GDP and real GDP? A. Nominal GDP includes imports, real GDP does not. B. Nominal GDP is measured in current prices, real GDP is adjusted for inflation. C. Nominal GDP excludes government spending, real GDP includes it. D. There is no difference between the two. 6. What is a GDP deflator? A. A measure of unemployment rates. B. A price index used to convert nominal GDP to real GDP. C. The ratio of exports to imports. D. A measurement of consumer confidence. 7. If a country's nominal GDP increases by 8% and inflation is 3%, what is the real GDP growth rate? A. 11%. B. 8%. C. 5%. D. 3%. 8. Which component typically represents the largest portion of GDP in developed economies? A. Government spending. G. Net exports. Consumer spending. C. D. Investment. 9. What does I represent in the GDP expenditure formula? A. Interest payments only. B. Gross private domestic investment, including business spending and residential construction. C. International trade. D. Income from wages. 10. Which of the following is included in the investment I component of GDP? A. Purchase of corporate stocks. B. Purchase of government bonds. C. Construction of new residential housing. D. Purchase of used machinery. 11. What does a negative net exports figure X minus M indicate? A. The country exports more than it imports, trade surplus. B. The country imports more than it exports, trade deficit. C. The country has balanced trade. D. The country has no international trade. 12. Which of the following government expenditures would be included in the G component of GDP? A. Social Security payments to retirees. B. Unemployment benefits. C. Salaries of public school teachers. D. Interest payments on government debt. 13. What are transfer payments in the context of GDP? A. Payments included in GDP because they represent economic production. B. Payments excluded from GDP because they don't represent production of goods or services. C. International money transfers. D. Corporate dividend payments. 14. Which approach to calculating GDP sums all incomes earned in the production of goods and services? A. Expenditure approach. B. Production approach. C. Income approach. D. Balance approach. 15. In the income approach to GDP, which of the following is included? A. Employee compensation, profits, rent, and interest. B. Only corporate profits. C. Only wage income. D. Government tax revenues. What is GDP per capita? A. The total GDP of a country. B. GDP divided by the population of a country. C. GDP divided by the number of employed workers. The GDP growth rate. 17. What does it mean when a country experiences 2 consecutive quarters of negative real GDP growth? A. The country is experiencing inflation. B. The country is technically in a recession. C. The country has achieved full employment. D. The country's nominal GDP is declining. 18. Which of the following best describes the production approach, value-added approach to calculating GDP? A. Summing all final goods and services produced. B. Summing the value added at each stage of production. C. Counting only consumer purchases. Measuring only exports. 19. Why are intermediate goods excluded from GDP calculations? A. They are not valuable. B. To avoid double counting since their value is included in final goods. C. They are only used in international trade. D. They are considered transfer payments. Which sector's output is most difficult to measure accurately in GDP calculations? A. Manufacturing sector. B. Government sector. C. Underground informal economy. D. Agricultural sector. 21. What is gross national product (GNP) and how does it differ from GDP? A. GNP includes only domestic production. GDP includes foreign production. B. GNP includes income earned by citizens abroad. GDP measures production within borders. C. GNP and GDP are identical measures. D. GNP excludes government spending. GDP includes it. 22. If a Japanese company operates a factory in the United States, where is this production counted? In Japan's GDP only. In US GDP only. In both countries' GDP equally. It is not counted in any GDP. 23. What is the purpose of calculating real GDP using constant prices from a base year? A. To make GDP appear larger. B. To eliminate the effects of price changes and measure actual production changes. C. To include government transfers. To calculate per capita income. 24. Which of the following would cause nominal GDP to increase but not real GDP? A. Increased production of goods and services. B. Inflation with no change in actual output. C. Population growth, D. Technological improvements. 25. What is the relationship between GDP and the standard of living? A. GDP perfectly measures standard of living. B. Higher GDP per capita generally correlates with higher standard of living, but doesn't capture all quality of life factors. C. GDP has no relationship to standard of living. D. GDP only measures standard of living for wealthy nations. 26. Which of the following is a limitation of using GDP as a measure of economic well-being? A. It includes the value of leisure time. B. It accounts for income inequality. C. It excludes non-market activities like household work and volunteer services. D. It measures environmental quality. What is the GDP growth rate? A. The nominal GDP for the current year. B. The percentage change in real GDP from one period to another. C. The difference between nominal and real GDP. The ratio of GDP to population. 28. In calculating GDP, how are inventory changes treated? A. They are completely ignored. B. Increases in inventory are counted as investment. Decreases are subtracted from investment. C. They are only counted if sold to consumers. D. They are classified as exports. 29. Which international organization publishes comparable GDP data for countries worldwide? A. World Trade Organization, WTO. B. International Monetary Fund, IMF, and World Bank. C. United Nations Security Council. D. North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. 30. What is the expenditure method's treatment of imports in GDP calculation? A. Imports are added to GDP. B. Imports are subtracted from GDP to avoid counting foreign production. C. Imports are ignored entirely. D. Imports are only counted if re-exported. 31. If country A has a GDP of $5 trillion with a population of 50 million, what is its GDP per capita? A. 10,000. B. $50,000. C. $100,000. D. $500,000. 32. What does the term base year mean in the context of real GDP calculations? A. The first year GDP was ever calculated. B. The reference year whose prices are used to calculate real GDP across all years. C. The year with the highest GDP. D. The current year. 33. Which of the following scenarios would increase a country's GDP? A homeowner painting their own house. B. A company building a new factory. C. A person buying a 10-year-old used car. D. A parent providing childcare for their own children. 34. What is potential GDP? A. The actual current GDP. B. The maximum GDP that could be achieved with full employment and optimal resource utilization. C. The minimum GDP needed for survival. D. The GDP projected for next year. 35. How do economists typically account for the underground economy when calculating GDP? A. They ignore it completely. B. They make statistical adjustments and estimates to account for unreported economic activity. C. They count it as negative GDP. D. They only count illegal activities. 36. If a country's real GDP is 10 trillion and its GDP deflator is 125, what is the country's nominal GDP? A. 8 trillion. B. Trillion. C. 12.5 trillion. D. 15 trillion. 37. Which of the following best explains why GDP is considered an imperfect measure of economic well-being? A. It includes all government spending. B. It excludes non-market activities such as household production and volunteer work. C. It measures production within a country's borders. D. It includes business investment spending.